Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for coming back today to tell us more about sensory processing.
Thanks for having me, Michelle. I'm excited to be here.
So, what is sensory processing?
So, sensory processing is the way that the brain receives, organizes, and responds to all of our different sensory input.
And what are the different forms of sensory input?
Yes, so we have auditory input, we have visual input, everything that we're seeing. We have touch, tactile, the things that we're feeling. We have smell and taste, which impacts all of our oral processing. We have vestibular input, which is where our head is in space. We have proprioceptive input, which all of our joints and our ligaments and our muscles and tendons, they tell us where our body is in space. And intraceptive input. So that's the ability to feel what's happening inside of our body.
Oh, wow. And this is something that affects adults and kids, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we are all very individual on how we process our sensory information. Some kids and adults, they are going to be registering all of their auditory input. So, for instance, if you walk into a classroom, one child may be able to sit down, focus on what the teacher is saying, hear it, listen, and complete whatever the instruction was. Whereas like another kid with different auditory processing profile, they might go into that same exact classroom, hear what the teacher's saying, but also be hearing a fan, also be hearing a bird, also be hearing a car drive by. So it's just so much that they're trying to process. So they won't be able to respond the same way as our first student because they're already working so hard just to hear what the teacher's saying.
Oh, wow. And I believe today you're going to be teaching us some different tools to help the different kids with the different sensory stimuli. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we can
Okay.
go through some of the different sensory areas of input and some examples. So like for the auditory input, for instance, if you see a kid that's not able to focus, well, that could be a red flag for a lot of different things. So what are some more of the auditory input red flags? You could have a kid who's humming really loud or singing or making other noises, because what they're actually trying to do is block out some of that other auditory input. So that's one area where if you see a kid that's doing that, one strategy could be is, hey, do you want to use some headphones to block out some of this while we're doing this assignment today? That's a great tool to just try, and there's no harm in that. I know of me personally, like when I get home and I'm working with my kids and there's music on, noise on, and I'm trying to get dinner ready, I can't do it. I have to turn the music down, be like, okay, I'm focusing on this conversation. So just starting to realize that everyone responds differently to that auditory input, that's a first very valuable thing to be aware of.
Yeah.
Do you want some more examples of different
I do.
sensory input?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm also very curious, what was the term that you used for what's happening internally within us?
Yes, intraceptive
Yeah.
processing.
Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, of course. So sometimes we take it for granted that we know when our stomachs are full. Not everyone, it's very common now in our society where we overindulge, things like that. But that internal feeling of, oh, I'm hungry, oh, I'm thirsty, oh, I have to go to the bathroom. Sometimes with our sensory input, that signal is not being messaged to the brain. So these kids actually and adults need more help getting that awareness from inside their body to their brain that, oh, I need to go to the bathroom. Oh, I am full. So there's different strategies for that as well. If you take a drink of really ice cold water, you know how you can feel it going down your throat?
Yeah.
And inside down to your stomach? Doing strategies like that and walking children through that. So lots of times if you have a kid that's withholding, there always can be other underlying things. If there's a child that's had constipation in the past, they might be fearful of going to the bathroom because of that past pain. But it's important to look at their interoception. Oh, when they're bouncing on a ball, are they able to feel, oh, your tummy's going up and down? The deep breathing that you do, just bringing that awareness of what it feels like inside. Lots of times this goes along too with emotions, the butterfly feeling in your stomach. So it's starting to just be aware that, some kids, they might actually, and adults, have a more difficult time feeling what's going on internally with their systems.
And with the different sensory stimuli, like you mentioned, going home and having the music and the conversations,
Mhm.
can that end up impacting how you're processing the interception and your focus?
Yeah, yeah. So if we have a kid that, let's say, so we all have a different threshold for our sensory input and all of our different sensory systems. So if we have a child who is not able to block out other sensory input, it might be harder for them to be aware of their system. So yes, going home and having that quiet time is kind of
Mhm.
like a reset a lot of times, because if we're processing everything, like let's go into the visual system, for instance.
Okay.
So sometimes, again, I can walk into this room and I see where I am right now. Oh, there's a desk, there's a chair. Perfect. That's where I'm going to go sit, at that desk and that chair. Whereas you might get another person who comes into this room and they notice every detail. Oh, there's something blue hanging on that door, and there's a sticker over here that is red and it's round, and oh, there's this and there's that, and oh, this light is really bright for me. I can't tolerate it. And these are a lot of times the kids that pay attention to detail. They might get dysregulated when things are changed because their visual system is working. They're looking at all of these details, and different lights, things like that can really be alarming to
Hmm.
their system. So that's another thing. If they're doing that all day long, they might need to have some of that quiet time. And the opposite, sometimes we have our kids who aren't, and adults again. I keep saying children since I'm a
That's
pediatric OT, but we have the opposite, where we don't notice those details and we don't observe those different visual stimuli. Same with, there are strategies that maybe are calming to certain people. Like, for instance, this visual stimuli
Mhm.
might be super calming for one kid. So along with our sensory profile, you start to learn what are the different calming strategies, what areas can we use to help bring awareness, calm the brain.
Can you share some more of those strategies for calming the brain?
Yes, definitely. Okay. So my favorite is if we're looking at proprioception, that's where our body is in space. So this skill helps us feel grounded, helps us feel calm. So with proprioceptive input, if we have a child who doesn't know where their limbs are in space,
Hmm.
you can imagine how that'd feel, kind of like floating around like an astronaut. You might be bumping into things. So you're not feeling calm, grounded, regulated. So those proprioceptive strategies tend to be calming, for infants, for children with proprioceptive differences, for vast majority of people. So that's a lot of our heavy work,
Mm.
heavy work, because if I'm pushing against something, oh, my body now knows where it is in space. So some easy examples of that is jumping on a trampoline. You're squatting down, then you're pushing up, squatting down, then
Mhm.
you're pushing up. That's so calming and regulating for a lot of people. The bear hugs, deep pressure. Oh, there are my arms, and this feels calm for my brain. Pushing and pulling. So, like pushing a cart. Oh, this heavy work of pushing a cart is sending the feedback all the way to my brain. I'm getting that work that my body needs, that my brain needs, so that I now know where I am in space. Yeah, there's heavy work. It's really, really helpful for so many kids and adults. That's one strategy.
Yeah, those are some great strategies. And I'm really curious, does the amount of time that children and or adults have with different media like iPads, phones, TV, music, does any of that impact the amount of sensory that we can process? And has there been a shift over time?
Yes, I would have to look at the research to give you
Hmm.
an evidence-based answer, but I
Yeah.
know that watching screens is a passive activity.
Okay.
Sitting, we're doing something that is just passive. Um, if we're doing that all the time, we're not getting these sensory experiences. If we're not getting these sensory experiences, our brain does not learn how to organize and respond to it. So if you have someone that's sitting there passively watching a screen all the time, I know this affects our sleep, things like that, other areas that I'm not going to address right now.
Okay.
But definitely, they're not getting those in nature experiences. They're not getting that trial and error. Like along with that proprioceptive, I learn, oh, when I pick this up and set it down, this is how much force I need. But oh, if I go lift this 10-pound weight up, oh, I now need more force to pick it up and set it down. If we're sitting and just watching a screen, you're not getting all those types of different experiences to learn how to respond.
Yeah, I remember last time you were here, you were talking about learning how to crack an egg.
Yes.
And how that takes a lot of trial and error to learn how much force, and then to open up the egg and to mix it up, all of those sensory processes that you experience from learning how to crack an egg, because it is challenging.
It is. And that actually gives me another suggestion that is challenging for a lot of kids, but it can be calming. And this is where it's very individualized, because we have strategies like, for instance, I'm going to talk about linear movement. That's that back and forth movement that we find very calming for our central nervous system. That's like rocking a baby to sleep, that back and forth and back and forth. And that's where our inner ear, our equilibrium, the vestibular input, we're learning, oh, where am I in space? Oh, and I'm calm and I'm safe and I'm regulated. But if you put a child on a swing, one child, like child A, might want to swing for hours. This is so fun, back and forth and back. I think I talked about this a little bit last time, but that back and forth being really calming and regulating. Yeah. Then you put child B on a swing and the parent's like, no, he hates the swing. All right. But it might not be the linear movement. It might be the fact that if we don't have our proprioceptive awareness and our feet are off the ground, that's pretty scary. If we don't have a strong core, that's pretty scary. If our grip's not strong enough, we feel like we're going to fall out of that swing. That's pretty scary. So it might not be the fact that the linear movements not regulating for that child, but that swinging is too tricky for that child. So then you could try, okay, let's change this activity to meet the child where they're at. If you just hold your child's arms, I like to do above the elbow for a nice secure grip, and you just do row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, like that back and forth. Now they have their caregiver or whoever that loved other person is, looking them in the eyes, making sure they're safe, so they have more security. They're getting that feedback, but they're also getting that linear movement while they're seated on the ground. So, okay, I'm going back in space, but I don't feel like I'm going to fall everywhere. Or maybe I do feel like I'm going to fall everywhere, but the caregiver can see that. Put your arms on the shoulders. Try it now like this. Oh, this is where I am in space and I am safe. So, okay, that linear movement is a very calming strategy, but we kind of have to get it right by looking at the individual child. And same with that deep pressure. Like, okay, bear hugs might be so calming and regulating, but if the child feels like they're getting restricted, then they're no longer getting the benefits. So I guess feeling safe and secure is the first thing always when working with our kids, because everyone receives sensory input differently.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, does age also play a factor? Because I know that they have the baby swings where it's more of a bucket seat, but then they have the I don't even know what those seats are called, but where
the standard,
it's more
like slings.
Standard, exactly. Yeah. Because I imagine there's a certain, I mean, I don't think you would put like a 6-month-old in a standard seat. They would still go in the baby seat, right?
Yeah. So if anything, age kind of puts a hindrance on kids that have differences, because then that's why maybe you're going to put a 10-year-old right on that standard sling seat, but maybe their proprioceptive input or awareness, I should say, isn't at that level yet. So that's probably actually why then at a later age, you might get children that aren't feeling safe, secure, and then they can't attend. You're getting a lot of people come to me with behaviors because they're not feeling regulated because the demands are too high.
Oh, can you share a little bit more about that?
Yes. Again, okay. So what you want to do is, if a child is having difficulties, it's really about breaking it all down. So eating, let's do eating, for example.
Okay.
My child's messy, but so picky. I'm not understanding what's going on. So, okay, well, let's look at, what are you giving the child? Is it something that has a soft and hard texture? Well, let's grade it back. What did we first give kids. Let's just start doing the softer textures so that they learn, okay, what is in my mouth? How do I control this? How do I manipulate it, know what it is, get that, and then swallow it. Because sometimes even, the things in our mouth, it can be really overwhelming for a lot of kids. So I guess my example would be whatever the challenging task is, if you can break it down, think about everything that's involved and try and simplify. The simpler you can get something, then the child's going to have a success. Then, oh, that was actually super easy for my kid and they responded well. Okay, let's make it harder. It's better to go from easiest to harder, where they're feeling accomplished, they're getting these achievements, and then get to the point where, okay, this is where this is where we're at, this is what we have to work on. So then they have the confidence to be like, okay, now I can skill build at this point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so building the confidence and setting them up for success versus setting them up for failure. Because if you mentioned the 10-year-old on the swing, if the child has never been on a swing or maybe even seen a swing before, it could be very overwhelming because of all of those sensory processes happening, as well as the skill needed to swing on a swing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot going on with our systems. It's very interesting to me. It's everyone's unique, everyone's different. So I think the number one thing to just recognize is the more we learn about these differences, the more we can understand, we can modify, we can support all these differences. And then the more that we're supported, the safer we feel, the more think about children. When they feel safe, they explore more, right? They feel like, okay, this is my boundary. My mom or whoever it is right there. They check in. Okay, I still feel safe. I'll take a few more steps. It's the same with sensory processing. If we're feeling safe, we're free to explore more. If we feel like our differences are recognized and understood a bit, or even just allowed to explore, like that there could be these differences, then we're gonna want to explore that. Because the world can be overwhelming. I mean, with our tactile system, for instance. So I can put my socks on and I'm tactilely aware. Okay, there's a sock going on over my foot. Now I'm putting my shoe on. I have that awareness. I feel it. But then when I'm walking around the day, I'm not thinking about my sock being on my foot. Same with the tag on my shirt. I feel it, but then I forget about it. I'm able to move on. Some of our kids, when they're getting dressed, it is so overwhelming. And sorry, again, I keep saying kids.
Okay, yeah.
But it is so overwhelming because, like that tag, for instance, they don't then register that that's not a threat. So our tactile system's there for a reason. If you touch a hot stove, you want the signal quickly to be sent to your brain that, okay, we have a danger. I need to remove my hand so that I am safe. With a tag, it's not a threat. But if we're processing it at a more extreme level, that tag becomes an annoyance. We could even say becomes a threat. It's scratchy, 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 scratchy. If you have that in the background all day long, I mean, how are you expected to stay calm and regulated when you're just like, imagine someone scratching your back all day long, like with sharp nails, you wouldn't feel calm and regulated. So the more we look at like, oh, my kid is not getting dressed, which is a challenge in my household. I'm always trying to stay calm. But the more then you can realize, oh, okay, well, let's modify this. Let's change it. Let's cut the tags off. And then we can also work with an occupational therapist to get some more of that tactile exposure, so that in a safe, playful way, so that they learn that, oh, this tactile input is not a threat. Okay, I can now wear my shirt safely all day long and not be irritated by that. I hope that explains some of it a bit.
It does. Do you feel that we're doing enough to support our children in sensory?
I think we need more awareness.
Okay.
And more openness to the fact that we sometimes don't know. It's hard because children at the younger age, they don't have a voice for themselves. So it's about, let's just observe. Let's not feel a rush to oh, they're responding, so now I need to respond. I think the more we just observe and we try and take in what we see, we're going to be able to brainstorm and problem solve, all of that. Also, the more that we get our kids into these fun, safe sensory experiences where, all right, this child might be totally finger painting with their hands, and then this child is barely touching it. Okay, let's give that kid who's barely touching it a Q-tip. The kid it's everywhere, maybe they're the kid that then though won't realize that they have it on their face at the end. So let's give them a mirror and help them notice, oh, I do still have this on me. So I think our society has a long way to go. I think it's just a huge thing to understand and learn. So just the more we're open and we collaborate all together, I think we'll continue to make the right strides in the right direction.
Definitely. And because it sounds like at the end of the day, a lot of this has to do with safety, security, awareness, and a lot of patience is needed too on the adult's part.
Yes, a lot of patience. So also taking care of yourself as the adult. If you have a child that has these sensory differences, make sure you're taking care of yourself first. Do the breathing, step away when needed, because I mean, it is tiring. And so you staying regulated and you breathing is the first priority, so that then you can help your child to do that. It's that modeling of, okay, we can stay calm together. And it is, and parents need that, caregivers need that, teachers need that. It's hard when you have a kid in your class that's throwing stuff. It's hard to stay. First, you have to look at the safety for the whole classroom, of course. So taking that time as a teacher too, to breathe, you're going to then be able to respond a lot better. So adding mindfulness like you're doing for adults is going to help our children.
Yeah, and I hope all of you at home that are watching, we have an interview with Amy, and she does a lot of self-compassion exercises that she leads us through, which can definitely be helpful in regulating yourself.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, Amanda, is there anything else that you're wanting people to know about sensory?
I think it's all about asking questions, just observing, asking questions. And then if you have an inkling that your child might be having these sensory differences, if they're having outbursts or what people look at as behavioral issues, seek a professional, get an occupational therapist. You can get a sensory profile done, because then the more information you can get, then the more understanding you're going to have, and then the better you're going to be able to help your little ones.
Wonderful. And we'll include your Instagram information below, so that if people have questions, or I know that on your Instagram, you give additional tips on how to handle sensory, we'll include that as well.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amanda.
Bye.